This is Janice of Dorval. The International Radio Report presents 30 minutes of news, information, and commentary on developments in the world of radio every Sunday morning at 10:30 on CKUT 90.3 FM in Montreal and online at ckut.ca.
Welcome, everyone, to the International Radio Report for Sunday, August the 3rd, 2025, here on CKUT 90.3 FM in Montreal. My name's Sheldon. I'm here with Jill, and we have a whole bunch of stories for you today from the world of radio. Some interesting things related to tsunamis and the Voice of America, Radio Canada, CBC. Take you around the world a little bit today. So we'll get started, though, first with a sad note. A very prominent name in the world of the radio listening hobby has passed away. Jerry Lee Dexter. And this comes via Ralph Perry, Richard Cuff, John Filiozzi, and Rich D'Angelo. Ralph Perry writes, "I just received word today from Jerry's wife, Sharon, that Jerry passed away July the 28th at the age of 89, peacefully in his sleep. He will be terribly missed. Mark Taylor and I were just getting into contact with Sharon this weekend to schedule a visit with Jerry later during the week. Jerry was one of a kind, the ultimate old-school QSL-driven DXer with limitless energy to send out follow-up reports and tune new DX targets. Other than jazz, his love for DX was perhaps only matched with his dedication to his Green Bay Packers football team. Famous for his jazz fandom, he is right now probably chatting with his hero, Stan Kenton, and listening to great bands in the sky." Rich D'Angelo of NASWA writes, "Sad news indeed to hear of Jerry's passing. Thanks for sharing this with the NASWA group, as Jerry was NASWA for as long as anyone around these days. A great supporter of the club during his lifetime in the shortwave radio hobby. He's definitely one of the great old-school DXers who taught me quite a lot about chasing QSLs over the years. Being his roommate at several gatherings always gave me a chance to gain useful information in my shortwave QSL hunting activities. I recall once questioning my pursuit of a verification versus what the station stood for. Jerry set me straight, separating the two matters into separate and distinct discussions. Radio stations were meant to be QSL'd, no matter what the station stood for or represented. Whether or not you separately supported the station's purpose was another matter. That is a distinction I carried with me during my QSL chasing years." And just on a side note, Jerry was a popular communications editor. He also published many books on shortwave, in particular QSLing, and he operated a publishing business called Tierra Publications in his town of Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. And I'm sure many of you will remember some of his publications. They were always quite interesting. A lot of them were really targeting the newcomers to the hobby. I remember a book called So You Bought a Shortwave Radio, Easy Shortwave Antennas, Limited Space Antennas for Shortwave Listening. A lot of interesting books. He also put out the annual Pirate Radio Directory for a number of years. They were all publications through his TRE publications. So I had the chance to meet Jerry many, many times over the years at Anarch conventions and SWF festivals. So hadn't seen him for quite some time. Didn't realize he was 89 years old. So lived a very long life.
I had several of his books, and I think a lot of them started and shaped my learning curve of shortwave radio listening and what it's all about in my late teenage years.
One book of his that I have here, and a lot of people have asked me, where can I get a copy of this book? It was an interesting book called Shortwave Listening with the Experts. And they're just about impossible to find. Sometimes someone will put one up for sale on eBay and people pay like crazy amounts of money for it. But it's an excellent textbook, lots of interesting material in it. If you're lucky enough to have a copy of that, it's just a great publication. So we remember Jerry Dexter and all his work that he did and publications that he put out for the shortwave listening hobby.
Next, we have a story about the CBC Radio Canada asked to cut up to 15% of budget as part of the federal efficiency review. This is by Connie Thiessen of Broadcast Dialogue. CBC Radio-Canada has confirmed it's been asked to participate in a federal government expenditure review that would require the public broadcaster to cut up to 15% of its total budget over the next 3 years. The directive, which applies to every major Crown corporation and federally funded organizations like VRL, the National Gallery of Canada, Canadian Museum of Human Rights, and Statistics Canada, is part of an effort to find $25 billion in annual savings as Ottawa pledges an additional $9 billion for defense this year alone, while also signing NATO's new defense investment pledge in June, committing 3.5% of GDP to core military spending and 1.5% to infrastructure by 2035. Lesser spending reduction targets of 2% have been imposed on the Department of National Defense, Canada Border Services Agency, and the RCMP. The government will assess all of the proposals, including CBC Radio-Canada's final decisions, will be reflected in the government's main estimates for 2026-27. Made public early next calendar year. Any necessary action on our part would be taken after that time. A CBC Radio spokesperson told Broadcast Dialogue, adding that the efficiency exercise is separate from Prime Minister Mark Carney's commitment to invest an additional $150 million in the public broadcaster. CBC President and CEO Marie-Philippe Bouchard told staff in an internal memo obtained by Le Journal de Québec that the broadcaster has been asked to identify up to $98 million in proposed cuts next year, rising to $198 million within 3 years. Cuts of this magnitude, if implemented, would impact some jobs, Bouchard said. Friends of Canadian Media, the public broadcaster watchdog and media advocacy group, wrote in a letter to its membership that the idea of cuts at CBC Radio-Canada goes completely against what we fought for in this election and what millions of Canadians voted for at the ballot box. We have opposed these types of cuts before, and we will do so again, says Sarah Andrews, Friends Senior Director, Government and Media Relations. In the meantime, we will ensure that the government knows what Canadians think of this decision. Now, I'm sure there's a little bit of fat to cut somewhere in the CBC Radio-Canada, as long as it doesn't impact the programming itself and the quality of, the news and the different offerings of the CBC Radio-Canada, because that's a very delicate situation. And it is definitely interesting because when we got to the elections, indeed, there was one side with the Conservatives that wanted to almost remove CBC from our radio and TV landscape. Of course, Mark Carney did say, no, we're going to save Radio-Canada. We're going to make sure it continues. But there was nowhere that in any text or any words that there would be some cuts, though.
Yeah, I'm sure, as you said, there is a lot of fat. There's been a lot of, complaining and comments made about bonuses paid to executives and things like that. If you can keep the core of the operation itself and trim some of that other stuff out there, that hopefully is the direction they're going to take. If it does have an impact on programming and the production, that sort of thing, then it's a whole different story. So it's over 3 years, so 15% over 3 years. At least it's not all in one shot. So we'll see where it all comes out and what the new CBC and Radio-Canada will look like after those cuts have been made.
Yep.
Our next story is interesting, particularly with CKUT being a campus community radio station. The National Campus and Community Radio Association survey indicates campus and community radio audience is growing. This is also by Connie Thiessen from Broadcast Dialogue. National Campus and Community Radio Association says a new national survey it's commissioned affirms that campus and community radio is a growing source of trusted media. Conducted by Abacus Data from June 26 to July 2nd, the survey of 1,500 Canadians found that nearly one-third, 32%, regularly 10%, or occasionally 22% listen to campus or community radio, a significant increase from 2017, when that number was at 19% and up from 26% in 2022. Among Canadians aged 18 to 29, regular 15% and occasional 33% listenership rises to 48%, which the executive director Barry Rook says illustrates its unique appeal to younger audiences. These numbers show that our sector is more relevant than ever, said Rook. In a release, we reach listeners that mainstream media often doesn't, including newcomers, Indigenous communities, youth, and people who prefer to hear local voices and languages. By gender, slightly more men than women are listening to community radio, with 12% of men regular listeners, 23% occasional, versus 9 and 21% respectively. Listenership is also higher among immigrants to Canada, with 13% of newcomers listening regularly and 26% occasionally, versus 10 and 21% of those born in Canada. Regular and occasional listeners are also more likely to identify as a visible minority, 45% versus 29%. By province, those in British Columbia, 14%, Saskatchewan and Manitoba, 13%, and Ontario, 12%, regularly listen the most. Those in Alberta listen the least regularly at 8%. Campus and community radio listeners also tend to be higher income earners, with 28% of occasional and 15% of regular listeners making $75,000 to $100,000 annually. 47% of occasional and regular listeners hold union memberships, while 14% of regular and 26% of occasional listeners are university educated. The study also found the majority of regular listeners are active in their communities, 23%, and lean slightly to the right politically, 13%, versus 10% center and 9% who said they are politically left on the spectrum. This Abacus survey indicates that campus and community radio is a destination for news among regular listeners, with 18% tuning to it as their lead choice for world affairs, 20% for local news, and 16% for national news. The NCRA is calling on parliamentarians to recognize the sector's unique contribution to Canadian media and to continue to support the Community Radio Fund of Canada proposed Community Radio Initiative, calling for consistent federal support for the sector. We aren't just playing music, we're building community resilience, fostering local journalism, and helping keep democracy accessible, said Rook. Every dollar invested in this sector is a dollar invested in media that reflects Canada's full diversity. I have to say that pretty much describes our radio station here. If you've ever, tuned around and listened to some of the other programming on this station other than our show, I think you'll know what we're talking about. It is really a voice for people and groups who don't have a voice in conventional media. And it's interesting that now seems to be attracting more and more of an audience. As I think, with everything becoming generic out there and things sounding so much the same, people are maybe finally starting to look for alternatives. And it's certainly what campus and community radio is all about, alternative programming.
Yeah, definitely. I've listened to some of the shows on CKUT from time to time, sometimes related to politics or even some world events. And it's always very interesting. It's interesting to see, I'd say refreshing to see, often point of views that don't show up in the standard media. It is definitely where, and the reason why people listen to community radio stations, to hear something different. In our next story, a judge orders Trump administration to explain why order to restore Voice of America wasn't followed by David BAUDER, Associated Press media writer, via Mike Cooper and Glenn Hauser's World of Radio I.O. group. A federal judge on Wednesday essentially accused the Trump administration of ignoring his orders to restore Voice of America's operations and explain clearly what it is doing with the government-run operation that provides news to other countries. U.S. District Judge Royce Lambert of the District of Columbia gave the administration until August 13th to explain how it will get VOA working again. The outlet that dates back to World War II has been largely dark since March. Lambert said the administration needs to show what it is doing with the $260 million Congress appropriated for VOA's operations this year. Carrie Lake, the advisor appointed by Trump to run the government news agencies, said in June that 85% of the employees at VOA and its overseers at the U.S. Agency for Global Media had lost their jobs. She called it a long overdue effort to dismantle a bloated, unaccountable bureaucracy. Lambert said there's a process for eliminating funding that had previously been appropriated. Congress must vote on it, as it recently did for NPR and PBS funding, but that hasn't happened here. He scolded the administration for providing cagey answers and omitted key information when asked for it in previous court orders. Without more explanation, the court is left to conclude that the defendants are simply trying to run out the clock on the fiscal year without putting the money Congress appropriated towards the purposes Congress intended, Lambert wrote. The legal term for that is waste. There was no immediate comment from the White House. Of course not. So this we've seen in so many different agencies, and the VOA is part of it. You have the courts that give a decision that says, nope, got to put it back, but nobody answers. Nobody does anything. They just ignore it. So I think it's good that he's coming back and saying, well, okay, wait a minute. Please answer to me why VOA is not back, because I ordered VOA to be back on the air.
So many decisions that have come down from courts are just being totally ignored.
Yep.
Executive order has been the buzzwords of those being issued by the White House, and regardless of what anybody else says or thinks, they're just going ahead. So this is interesting. It's someone sort of pushing back. We'll see whether there's any response to it. So far, no. But what happens if you don't answer?
Yeah.
What's next?
So what's happening with our sun? Well, our sun is extremely quiet this week. We had quiet conditions. There's just a handful of sunspots, and they are small and all very stable. So for now, things are quiet, even though solar activity, is still high enough to give some interesting propagation. I was out with my radios at what I like to call urban de-expeditions to a park here in Montreal, and the higher frequencies, a lot of utility stations were coming through, and it was definitely good propagation. Just nowhere to tune. Just have to know, what to listen to also on the bands. They might sound very quiet, but sometimes it's because you might be listening to a frequency range where there's not a lot of stuff happening. Utilities were great for that. They showed me that there was a lot of activity actually on the higher frequencies. The sunspot number is 138, the solar flux 145. Well, for now, it's a quiet week ahead. So, tune around, check out what's out there. And you know what? Go outside of the international broadcast bands and put yourself in single sideband and tune real slowly in those frequencies. You'll be surprised what you could hear. But for that, you'll have to turn on a radio and listen.
This is Amanda Dawn Christie telling you that if you're interested in radio, AM, FM, shortwave, amateur radio, pirate broadcasting, and more, you won't want to miss the International Radio Report every Sunday morning at 10:30 on CKUT 90.3 FM in Montreal and online at ckut.ca.
One of the big stories this week, of course, was the 8.8 earthquake that hit eastern Russia and the aftermath of it, which generated all sorts of tsunami warnings. Our next story from Inside Radio is headlined, Hawaiian Tsunami Threat Highlights Push for Media Access to Honolulu Police Scanners. The threat of a tsunami in Hawaii on Wednesday is calling attention to an effort by broadcasters in Honolulu to regain access to police scanner information. Media outlets have been unable to access police and fire scanner radio communications since February 2022, when a new digital system began encrypting the frequencies used by the city's emergency agencies. Broadcasters are working to change that, and a bill under consideration in the Honolulu City Council might get the job done. The proposal would require the city to implement a strategic plan and internal procedures for the timely release of public information to the media and the public. That includes providing local media outlets with access to police radio communications. The police chief would also need to provide an annual report to the city council. The media and public's timely access to emergency-related information is essential to keeping the community safe from dangerous situations such as active shooters, armed and dangerous individuals, and violent crimes, the proposed bill says. It adds that the release of timely and accurate information to broadcasters and other media outlets helps in the prevention of misinformation spreading within the community, which it says can cause panic and public distrust. To access the information, the proposal says a station would need to hold a valid license from the Federal Communications Commission or have a verifiable track record of professional journalism. The Hawaii Association of Broadcasters has thrown its support behind the bill. HAB President Chris Leonard writes in an op-ed that broadcasters serve as early warning systems for the communities they serve, and without real-time access to scanner traffic, journalists are delayed in informing the public. Journalists don't simply broadcast what they hear. They use scanner traffic to mobilize teams, verify facts, and prepare accurate bulletins. This head start can help families avoid danger, reroute around closures, or assist in locating someone in distress, Leonard writes. He believes the lack of updated information caused confusion during the 2023 Maui wildfires. The media and law enforcement can work as partners in times of crisis, Leonard said. Importantly, law enforcement and media share the same goals during a crisis: protect lives, preserve safety, and maintain public trust. Treating media as partners acknowledges their role in reaching hundreds of thousands of residents across islands via TV, radio, websites, streaming, push alerts, and social media. But Interim Chief of Police Raid Vanek has said he believes that making police radio traffic available to the media could harm public and officer safety and risk media outlets misinterpreting real-time information. He is pushing the City Council to consider alternatives. The bill has cleared its first legislative hurdle in the Honolulu City Council, but no final vote will be taken until a public hearing is held. This is a story that I think a lot of cities, towns, people, scanner listeners in general, a lot of people are going to be paying close attention to. Most of these communications in pretty much all the major cities went digital, encrypted, for a reason. Some of the reasons that their police chief is talking about. But the media has always complained that, we used to use this information for really good purposes, and we can't do that anymore because we can't decode those transmissions. So there's two sides of the coin here. I'm not sure which side it's going to land on. There had been cases of the authorities saying that criminals are listening to our police activities and therefore are able to avoid capture or avoid or find out where there's times that they could do something illegal when there might not be police around or the police are busy doing something else. So, there's a lot of pros and cons going back and forth. But most major cities have adopted the encryption service for those types, fire and police and emergency services. This would make a major change if this passes in Hawaii.
I do remember the Montreal police at one point searching for a bad guy and actually getting a tip from a scanner listener saying that he has spotted the car they're searching. So, it's on both sides. There's good and there's bad. But we'll see. It's going to be an interesting decision to look at here. So we've got upcoming amateur radio de-expeditions and special events.
There's some interesting places getting ready to pop on the air with some ham radio act. So we start first with the country in Africa of Burundi. Tony, India Kilo 7 Whiskey Uniform Lima, is on a humanitarian mission between August the 2nd and August 10th. Activity will be during his spare time, and his call will be 9 Uniform 0 Delta X-ray. And he'll be operating 40 to 10 meters and using single sideband.
From Cook Island, Steve, Zulu Lima 2 Kilo Echo, will once again be active as Echo 51 Kilo Echo Echo from Rarotonga between August 3rd and August 18th. Operation from 40 to 10 meters using CW and SSB with verticals next to the sea.
The island nation of Mayotte, look for Tango Oscar 3 Kilo with 3 Italian operators. India Victor 3, Juliet Victor Juliet, India Kilo 3, Zulu Alpha Quebec, and India Zulu 3, November Yankee Sierra. Between August 2nd and August 10th, they will be operating 3 stations, running 80 meters all the way through 6 meters, and they'll be using the modes of CW, SSB, and FT4 and FT8.
August Aurora, Fumi, Juliet Hotel 7 Charlie Sierra Uniform will be operating as Juliet Delta 1 Bravo Romeo Charlie between August the 2nd and 8th. Operation on the HF bands using CW, SSB, and FT8, and the QSL card is via his home call.
From Jan Mayen, Peter Lima Bravo 2 Oscar Gulf will be active for another 2 weeks using his call Lima Bravo 2 Oscar Gulf / Juliet X-ray.
Corsica, Tom Oscar Kilo 1 X-ray Oscar Echo will be active as Tango Kilo / Oscar Kilo 1 X-ray Oscar Echo between August 4th and August 15th. The operations on HF will be using SSB and FT4 and FT8. And we are out of time.
Thank you all for tuning in today. We hope you enjoyed the show and that you'll tune us in again next week here on CKUT in Montreal for the next edition of the International Radio Report. You can reach us by email, radioreport@yahoo.com. We're live streaming and archived at ckut.ca. Our Facebook group is International Radio Report, and our YouTube channel is youtube.com/@IRR, when you can listen to our show at your convenience. Have a great week, everybody. Talk to you again next Sunday.
Bye-bye.